All right, have you ever stopped to think about who's really calling the shots when it comes to the global economy? Who's steering the ship on everything from trade to finance? Well, a massive part of that answer is a group called the G20. So let's jump right in and figure out what this powerhouse group is all about and why it honestly matters to every single one of us. So, first things first, what in the world is the G20? The name itself is pretty simple. It's the Group of 20, a forum for the planet's most important economies. But this group wasn't just dreamed up out of nowhere. No, it was actually forged in a crisis. Back in 1999, the Asian financial crisis sent shockwaves across the globe, and all these major players realized, hey, we need a better way to work together to keep the whole system from collapsing. And just like that, the G20 was born. Now, to really get a handle on the sheer influence we're talking about here, this quote just nails it. Seriously, think about it. If the entire world was one giant corporation, the G20 would basically be its board of directors. They're the ones in the room making the huge strategic decisions that affect, well, everyone. It's a pretty powerful way to look at it, right? And that leads us right to the big question. What actually gives this board of directors all its clout? Why is the G20 so incredibly important? Well, the answer isn't in opinions, it's in the numbers. And trust me, these numbers are staggering. Let's break them down. First up, let's talk money. The G20 countries all together account for a whopping 85% of the entire global GDP. That means the vast, vast majority of all the economic value created on Earth comes from this one group. And it doesn't stop there. What about trade? Well, a full 3/4, that's 75%, of all international trade involves these very same nations. They are, quite literally, the engines of global commerce. And finally, people, 2/3 of the world's entire population lives inside a G20 country. So when their leaders get together, they're not just speaking for themselves, they're representing a huge slice of humanity. You put all that together, and it's clear their decisions have a direct and absolutely massive global footprint. So who exactly gets a seat at this incredibly powerful table? Who are the members of this global board of directors? Let's take a look at the lineup. The group is made up of 19 individual countries, plus the European Union. And as you can see, it's a real mix of both developed and developing economies from basically every corner of the globe, from North America to Asia, Europe to Africa. It's this incredible diversity that makes their conversations so complex and so important. Okay, so you have this super powerful, super diverse group. How does it actually operate? You might be picturing some giant, shiny headquarters, kind of like the UN building in New York. But here's where the G20 gets really interesting. Its structure is surprisingly different. Get this, the G20 has no permanent building, no fixed staff, no central office at all. And that's not by accident. This lean setup is designed to keep it agile and quick on its feet, instead of becoming a slow, bogged-down bureaucracy. So, you're probably wondering, how does anything get done? Well, the secret sauce is a rotating presidency. Every single year, a different member country gets to be in the driver's seat. That host nation sets the agenda for the year, organizes all the meetings, and it all leads up to the big one, the annual Leaders Summit. The work itself is split into 3 main channels. First, you've got the finance track. That's where the finance ministers and central bank governors talk about all the core economic stuff. Then there's the Sherpa track, and yeah, it's named after the Sherpas who guide climbers up Everest. These officials do all the heavy lifting to prepare the path for their leaders at the summit. And finally, you have the engagement groups, which bring in voices from outside of government, from business, youth, and women's organizations, to make sure more perspectives are heard. Now, to make all this a bit more real, let's look at a perfect recent example, India's G20 presidency. In 2023, India hosted the G20 for the very first time, and it was a genuinely historic moment on the world stage. India built its entire presidency around this incredibly powerful theme from an ancient Sanskrit text, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It translates to one Earth, one family, one future, a powerful call for global unity and a sense of shared destiny in tackling the world's biggest problems. And one of the biggest things to come out of India's leadership was a fundamental change to the group itself. As you can see here, the G20 actually became the G20+. Under India's presidency, the African Union was welcomed as a permanent member. This was a landmark move, giving a vital, permanent voice to the 55 nations of the African continent, a huge step for global representation. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground. So let's pull it all together and just quickly recap the most important things to remember about what the G20 is and why it really matters. So, what's the bottom line? The G20 is essentially the world's economic steering committee. It was born from a crisis, and it operates with this unique, flexible structure where the leadership changes every year. And as we just saw with India's presidency, it's still evolving, most notably by adding the African Union to the table, giving a voice to over 1 billion more people. And all of this leaves us with one last really important question to think about. We've seen the G20's immense power and its global reach, but can this small group, now 21 members, this global board of directors, can they truly and fairly steer the future for all 8 billion of us on this planet? That's a question worth pondering. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown.